When people talk about Deftones being a pioneering band in the creation of nu metal, both fans and critics alike cite Adrenaline as one of the foundational albums of the genre, along with Korn's self-titled 1994 release. Adrenaline debuted on October 3rd, 1995, 1 week shy of the 1-year anniversary of Korn's 1994 release. They both illustrate the duality of the genre. Korn, the Bakersfield funky bunch with the slap-happy bass, and the irreverent scatting of one's feelings of woe over bagpipes highlight the eccentricity of the genre. Sacramento's Deftones, on the other hand, represented the guilty conscience that projected onto semi-worthy targets and sought resolution through sensual means and screams. Adrenaline illustrates that the whole is truly greater than the sum of its parts, as each founding member of the band played a role in the metal behemoth that has birthed so many bands today. Any way you slice it, Deftones is Stephen Carpenter's band. He came up with the name, they jammed at his house first, and if it wasn't for his accident, there wouldn't have been a jam session to begin with. Fun fact, Steph is cousins with Chuck Billy from Testament and the godfather of Draven Bennington, Chester Bennington's son. Prior to being a musician, Steph's first love was skateboarding. I'd skate to and from school and then go out and skate all night, and I do that every day, says Carpenter. I loved chicks like any other guy, but that wasn't my thing. I wanted to skate. However, Carpenter would never make it onto Tony Hawk Pro Skater because when he was 15, he was hit by a drunk driver, leaving him hospitalized for 2 weeks. The guy was doing like 60 miles an hour when he slammed into me, and I wrecked his car. I never saw, heard, or felt it, and I've never had any pain from it, but physically, I should have died. It's weird. I woke up in the street and I felt totally normal other than the fact that my leg was snapped in half. It was a definite changing point in my life in the way I looked at things. But when it happened, I was so ungrateful for being alive that I was pissed off that I couldn't skate because I had just learned to do this fresh ass trick. The first thing I said when I realized I got hit by a car was, "Damn, how long before I start skating again?" And they said, "It might be some time." Steph also admitted to getting into trouble a lot when he was younger. When I was younger, a child, not like a kid but a teenager, I went through a phase where I lied about everything I did so I wouldn't get in trouble all the time. I learned how to lie so I would never get in trouble, and no matter how much I lied, I always got in trouble. I kept getting in trouble and then I was like, fuck, I need to just start busting loose and giving up the truth, cause I've got nothing to lose. Much like with his fibbing, wisdom eventually prevailed and he faced his mortality after his near-death experience. It resulted in him maintaining his love for skateboarding, but scaling back on it tremendously, which allowed him to make way for his true love. From Jen Wiederhorn for Guitar World, 1997. A week after Carpenter was released from the hospital, a friend came over with a guitar and Carpenter accidentally played his first chord. At the time, he was watching a Rat video, Round and Round, and saw Rat guitarist Warren DeMartini crash through a ceiling onto a dining room table and strum a power chord. He imitated the simple finger positioning, and lo and behold, when he strummed, it resembled music. It only took me a couple of weeks to get to where I could fake it and sound like I kind of knew what I was doing, he says. I learned by playing along with Anthrax, Stormtroopers of Death, and Metallica. And I didn't learn anything besides a power chord until I had been playing for about 4 years. What I'm about to say next is kind of shocking, but based on my research, Steph's first band wasn't Deftones. It was a punk band called Four Mexicans. We were all skaters, said Carpenter. We were so bad we didn't know we had to tune to each other. We just played. I'd been playing guitar for 2 weeks and we just started jamming. I was like, yeah, I'm in a real band. Steph Carpenter knew Camilo Wong Moreno because Camilo would skate by Steph's house when Steph would play guitar outside with his amps in the garage. Plus, they were both skaters. Camilo got the name Chino from his uncles who initially called him Chinito because he looked more Chinese than Latino. Ethnically, he's quite diverse, especially on his mom's side. Chino's mom was actually his preschool teacher. Other sources say that it was Chino's mom who gave him the nickname, as it was also his grandfather's nickname. Chino grew up in a tough neighborhood where he was fortunate to escape gang culture. Instead, he got interested in breakdancing when he was 11 and then skateboarding. There were probably only like 5 of us in a 3-mile radius that skateboarded. We got together and hung out and did our own thing. We didn't really get caught up in all that stuff, the bad things that we could have easily gotten caught up in. But the cool thing was that I still had a lot of friends who were involved in all that shit, but never treated me like I was, a pussy. They respected me, never made fun of me. It was cool like that. It made me strong because it made me think I could do what I wanted to do and people still respected me. I made my own decisions. One would be inclined to agree, considering his heavy interest in 80s new wave was hardly befitting a metal band founded by a guy who loved heavy metal. I mean, what does Morrissey have to do with Metallica and Meshuggah? However, Moreno would eventually find his connection to heavy music. I was more into new wave, and then I got into punk bands like the Misfits, and then for me came Bad Brains. I tripped out when I first heard them. They really inspired me, HR especially, because of his honesty. My roots were in rap, so that just came out without me consciously trying. Maybe lyrically I'm more inspired by Depeche Mode, and execution-wise, I'm more influenced by HR and Bad Brains. Now I can look back on a record and see a lot of the different things that have influenced my style. Deftones lyrics have a bit of a reputation for being abstract. When interviewed by Flavor in July 1996, Chino explained, "Sometimes I'll sit down to write about something and I can't. Everything comes out really blunt. I don't like to be so blunt sometimes. Some nights I'll just be laying in my bunk writing, just to state some things, whatever I'm feeling. When we go to make songs, the melody and everything usually comes together. I throw in my abstract ideas, and then I'll put something very blunt in there, in the middle of everything. It sticks out more. I'm basically explaining something to you." A lot of people don't pay attention to lyrics, but the people that do, it's cool because they trip out on it. I like that a lot. However, there was one more founding member of Deftones who also skated with Chino. It was drummer Abe Cunningham. Abe and Chino met at C.K. McClatchy High School in the 7th grade when they were both 12 years old. Steph attended the same school, but he was 3 years ahead. Abe invited Chino to his house one day after school, and Chino was surprised to see that his drum set took up most of his room, leaving just enough space for a small bed. Chino was impressed by Abe's dedication to his instrument. In fact, Abe himself said that he started playing drums when he was about 7 or 8. "I've always liked heavy music," said Abe to Drummer magazine, "but I have a real different background than that. My dad was a bass player and my stepdad was a drummer. My first memories of being around music are from watching my dad play blues gigs. When I started to play at around 7 or 8 years, I dug out my parents' music like Beatles records and Hendrix albums. Mitch Mitchell is a great influence of mine, and I play along those. My mom was into things like The Police. All of that probably influenced me as a drummer more than metal drumming. Around the time I started playing, my dad sort of got away from the drums. I just sort of took over his kit. I was so fascinated with it that I just take it apart and put it back together again. Then in high school, I was in marching band and jazz band. I tried taking lessons for about a month, but the teacher was a real jerk, and that kind of gave me a bad taste for normal lessons. But I used to come home after school and just jam for hours. And that's still something I crave a lot, just playing on my own. I miss it when we're on the road." After visiting Abe's place, Chino decided to have Steph and Abe meet one another. They both attended McClatchy, they both skated, and they both played an instrument. Despite this, there was no intention of making a band. Chino, Steph, and Abe shared the story with Guitar World. "Me and Abe took the bus over to Stefan's house one day after school," recalls Moreno. "Stefan was sitting on his porch, and he had this wireless guitar on. All the cabinets were in the garage, and he was sitting on the porch rocking out. I was a clean-cut 15-year-old, and he probably thought I was some punk kid or something," adds Cunningham. "There was a drum set in the garage, but the garage door was closed. and he wanted me to go in there and play while he stayed on the porch. I'm like, what a prick. He doesn't want to jam with me, he's out on the fucking porch. At this point, Stephen Carpenter's leg would have been healed and he wouldn't have the excuse of a wheelchair being a hindrance. But for a now 18-year-old Steph to have wireless gear, how did he swing that? Well, legend has it that due to his accident with the drunk driver, Steph scored a cash settlement that allowed him to buy gear for the burgeoning band, or at least for himself. Except, based on what I've read, it isn't a legend, it's true. Some sources say that Abe denied that the band started because of that cash settlement when interviewed by Metal Edge, yet he was present when the claim was made with Guitar World. Perhaps what he meant was that he already had his own kit, so he never needed money from Steph to buy a kit, and all Chino needed was a Shure SM58 microphone and practice. However, Chino admitted to Flavor in 1996 that, quote, "When we first started out, I didn't sing. I was just friends with Abe and Stephen," end quote. That part of the story comes later. Nevertheless, the band was formed in the summer of 1988, which begs the question, how did they come up with the name? Believe it or not, the first show Deftones played was before they were even called Deftones. In fact, they didn't have a name. It was completely hilarious, remembers Carpenter. We were playing a barbecue and our bass player at the time showed up all late. When we were laying, his strap would come off and he didn't have enough sense to take the cord up through the strap and plug it in. So he'd keep stepping on the cord and unplugging himself. And he wouldn't notice, so he'd just keep playing and nothing would come out. Eventually, Chino would introduce another friend to the band. Enter Dominic Garcia, an elementary school friend of Chino's who actually knew his way around a bass guitar. Now, what isn't clear is if Chino had joined the band as vocalist to play that first barbecue or after Dominic joined. Nevertheless, Chino had joined as vocalist in 1988, but he initially wasn't very good. I didn't know how to sing, but hell yeah, I wanted to do it. I was pretty sorry, but I was passionate and just kept doing it. One influence would probably be Perry Farrell, because he was one of the only singers to take you from here to here, high to low, hard to soft, in a matter of seconds in one song. He'll draw you in. Here's Steph with Entertainment Avenue in 1996 and how he came up with the name Deftones. I used to work at a pizza place and I rolled the dough basically, and so I was all off by myself all the time and I had my headphones on and I'd just be rocking out. But I listened to everything. I listened to a lot of rap, rock, R&B, rap. I said rap twice, didn't I? I always imagined being in a band, but I could never pick out a name. I was like, how do bands just pick their names? Some bands, you got these metal bands that try to make their name all ugly and whatever. I wanted to pick a cool name, something that would just stand out, but not be all cheeseball at the same time. Well, I was really into old classic music, like from the 50s and shit like that. I was like, Tones. There's a lot of bands from that era that have the Tones in it. And Def, just cause I listened to a lot of LL Cool J, Public Enemy, like Def Jam and all that. Then I thought, Deftones. That would be kinda cool. Def would mean cool, and the tones would be like the sound of the old days but being vague. Cause we didn't do just one kind of music. It was pretty heavy, but it has never been focused on one particular style of music. Like most bands starting out, they played covers, specifically Danzig and Metallica, but Bad Brains would naturally feature as well. Chino and Steph shared what it was like practicing at Dominic's house with publication Alive and Kickin' in 1991. Man, there'd be these chihuahuas running around all over the place, and we'd always have to give someone's car a jump start or drive videos back to the store. One time, added Stephen, they held all our equipment hostage. We told them we'd give them $10 for being so cool and letting us practice there, and they just busted out and said, "You guys can't get your equipment till we get that $10. I'd go over there and my amps would be hooked up to the stereo. However, tragedy struck when Abe got the chance of a lifetime to become the drummer of the premier Sacktown band, Fallacy. They were the really big band in Sacramento, said Abe, and they were a lot older than me. I was maybe only 16 at the time, so it was really cool. Abe and I used to sit in class listening to Fallacy on my Walkman and idolizing them, recalled Chino. I'm not surprised he left. As a result, Dominic decided to move to drums, which created a vacancy for a new bassist. Out of 9 children, Cheng would emerge as the most prominent musician in his family, but it was thanks to his brother Ming that Chi would realize his potential. Their parents bought Ming a guitar and amp, but due to a traffic ticket, he sold his motorcycle and their parents told Ming to use some of the money to buy Chi a bass. Ming thought it was a great idea, and it allowed the teen brothers to form their band, Blitzkrieg, where they played Judas Priest, AC/DC, and Iron Maiden covers. Chi wanted to further his studies and enrolled in California State University, Sacramento, to study English and, apparently, to follow his then girlfriend. When Ming then followed his brother, he put up flyers all over town. Steph saw the flyer and rode his BMX bike to Ming's house miles away, where he played a demo, but to Ming, they sounded like, quote, bad Primus. Chino's voice still wasn't there, and the various influences clashed in a way that was not yet coherent. But Ming figured Chi would be interested, and he was right. To quote from his bass player interview from 1997, Chi is a self-professed Zen Buddhist hippie who has studied Taoism, quantum mechanics, chaos theory, and shamanism. Chi held down several jobs in addition to tutoring advanced poetry classes. When publication Flavor asked to explain his liner notes from Adrenaline, Chi responded, I don't know. A guy named Tom Brown Jr. studied under an Apache elder. Instead of categorizing under one Godhead, he saw that everyone was going to have their own interpretation of God and a sense of harmony. So, the Almighty Spirit that moves through all things refers to the harmonious nature of whatever he chose to call God, as it moves through everything, even down through subatomics. The way Tom Brown summed it up was the best. He didn't have any prejudices when talking about the spirit that moves through all things. He wasn't being judgmental. He was describing the harmonious underlying thing, which kind of rolls everything together. Actually, I don't know what it means. I just want people to think I'm cool. No, he was just a really cool shaman that described things in a way which was more applicable to everyone. So, at this point in 1990 to 1991, the lineup was Steph, Chino, Dominic, who just moved from bass to drums, and Chi. The Sacramento scene was fledgling, but uncertain. The Cattle Club on a Thursday night was the place to be, but even then it was hard to build traction. Primus was just getting big at the time, and there were a lot of those types of bands around, Steph explained. We never actually played with them, but we wanted to. We liked the bands, but we just wanted to play out rather than become part of some scene. Chino was confused as to why Deftones was always lumped with the funk metal bands, but many regarded their early sound as Primus derived. Many of the bands from the Bay Area were gaining prominence in Sacramento, which gave Deftones opportunities to jump on a bill with a band with name recognition while also booking shows on their own. Deftones played their first major gig with Psych Funkopus and Funky Blue Velvet in January 1990. However, the most prominent memory of the night was Dominic's little brother going on stage to tell a joke that started, "What do you get with 3 black guys in a sauna?" The crowd was pissed and booed him. Dominic had to calm down the crowd, but then his little brother gets back the mic, delivers the punchline, which I assume is something about Africa, and the crowd goes crazy with boos again. Somehow the band left without injury, and even with some fans. But apparently the anger was so bad that even Chi couldn't face the crowd, and that dude seemed unfazed by everything. However, tragedy struck again when Dominic got the chance of a lifetime to also join Fallacy. Fallacy back in the day was the real deal. They played with bands like Smashing Pumpkins, Primus, and Tool. Abe was still with them, but he was a busy boy, recording drums for a side project called Drop Acid. Thus, Deftones were incomplete again, but not for long. Enter John Taylor. They poached him from the band It's Not What You Think, That's actually the name of the band, it's not what you think. And he was christened the White Guy. As you probably know, Abe is also white. So why did John get that nickname, but not Abe? John was talking to Chi and he said, "My favorite songs are the songs you wrote before I got in the band." "Yeah," laughed Chi. "When you joined, we started writing white guy songs. We went from heavy Pearl Jam influences to Bruce Springsteen." Nevertheless, John was with the band for about 2 years, appearing with the band on their episode of the Sacto Active Rock Show in January 1992. He actually used to work on the show as an audio technician. They performed songs like Linus, Hopberg Hop, and Slinky, and Steph mentioned that their demo would be out later that year, which it was. Deftones' 1992 demo became the most expensive cassette ever sold on Discogs in May 2024, selling for $5,000. It features Like Linus, Hump, Some People, and Plastic. Only 15 copies were made, but if you go to Discogs.com now, you'll see tons of bootlegs. This wasn't Deftones' first demo, but it was the demo. On December 12, 1992, Deftones played the Crest Center, a 1,000-seat arena opening for legendary Saxton band Kai Kuln. Now if that name sounds weird, that's because it is. The founder of the band woke up one morning with that phrase tattooed on his ass. Having said that, the significance of this moment really could not be understated. As in Deftones playing with Kai Kuln, not the tattoo. Well, I suppose that was also significant, but yeah. Kai Kuln was the biggest band in Sacramento, which is why they were the first local band to headline a show at the Crest. Deftones had a darker, slower, and more metallic sound to the grunge funk hybrid that was Kai Kuln. And no one knew it at the time, but the kids were predicting, or perhaps dictating, the future. But then, tragedy struck, again, when John left the band in late December 1992 to join Prayer Wheel? Well, that happened later, but the official reason for Deftones manager Dave Park was that the breakup was mutual. But further intel from Chino revealed a cliche yet predictable reason for the demise: creative differences. But wouldn't you know it, 1993 rolled up and Fallacy called it quits too. Re-enter Abe Cunningham. They finally said, "Hey, we're great together, you have to come back." So I did, and it's been that way ever since, said Cunningham to Drummer magazine. With the classic lineup now present, Deftones would continue to practice in order to refine their sound until opportunity found them in 1994. From hearing Deftones on public access TV in January 1992 to hearing the band's cover of Suicidal Tendencies' Subliminal at the Cactus Club in December 1992, there was clearly improvement, but they were still some ways away from being ready, from being Deftones. That gig at the Cactus Club was their first solo show ever, and it was out of town in San Francisco, only a week before their show with Kai Kuln at the Crest Center. A show of note is one that occurred on April 2nd, 1993 at the Cattle Club, where Deftones played alongside San Francisco band Mondred, who would be releasing their EP the following day. Playing in support was a hip-hop group called Funk Socialistics, featuring a turntablist by the name of Frank Delgado. In the White Pony chapter of this series, it was mentioned that Delgado met Deftones in 1993 at the rehearsal space they both frequented in downtown Sacramento. And if that's the case, then perhaps the Socialistics got an opportunity to perform thanks to meeting Deftones. According to concertarchives.org, that gig in April 93 was their first show. Sometime in 1994, a producer or someone associated with Korn saw Deftones live. A band member, maybe Steph, gave them a tape, and then a few days later, they were talking music and wanted to play together. Their first reported show together took place at the Berkeley Square on April 29, April 30th, which was a famous one as it was the debut of Bored, which at the time was titled Orald. They had written it only a few days earlier. Deftones and Korn would play a total of 4 shows in 1994, 3 of them in a 4-day span. However, according to Chino, the two bands may have played at more shows than online records suggest. Nevertheless, it was at one of these shows with Korn that Deftones got their big break. Chino revealed more details to Rolling Stone in 2000. When we first started out, we were just playing for fun. We started playing around LA and met Korn. We booked shows with them and realized there were a lot of people who liked this kind of music. At an early show, we closed for a rock rap outfit like Ice-T's Body Count. Everyone left after that band. I think there were 10 people still there for us, basically Korn and their friends. We played a few songs, and a Maverick guy saw us and they signed us on the spot. It was crazy. It didn't kick in for me at all until I went home and quit my job. I was working at Tower Records' headquarters, pricing magazines and boxing them up to be shipped out. I liked that job. It was pretty easy. The fact that Korn played numerous LA venues in 1994 gives credence to Chino's quote. But of course they did. Their debut album just dropped. A Polestar piece from 1997 gave even more context. In a small studio space, label co-founder Freddie DeMann and A&R exec Guy Osieri came to see what the Deftones had to offer. We played 3 songs and they just said, "We want to sign you guys right now," Moreno said. Of course, about that time, other labels started swarming, but Chino said the others didn't have the absolute confidence that Maverick showed. Maverick was just like, "We just dig the vibe of your guys' band. You guys have good songs and we want to sign you," he said. There was no beating around the bush. It was just straightforward. And that's what we really liked about them.
So whatever. But we were just talking about kind of stuff, and all of a sudden, I'm sitting there talking to him, and the door opens behind me, so kind of whatever, and he starts talking. So I'm facing at him, and he's looking over my shoulder, and he starts talking to somebody, this woman. And I just look over, and Madonna's standing right next to me.
Holy fuck!
Talking to him, and he's like, "Hey, this me Chino. This is our new artist we're gonna sign. Whatever, blah blah." And I was like, hi, just kind of stunned, whatever.
Shit.
But as a kid,
yeah.
Trust me. I mean, I got pictures of me breakdancing, with Madonna, like cut off sleeve Madonna shirts on, whatever. She was like,
oh shit.
Yeah, I was bugging. And then she smelled so good too. I was just like, you know what I mean? I was just like, it was weird. It was that was one of the first famous people I've ever met too. So
That's
right off the bat, I was
one.
just like, what? And then
She was nice?
She was super nice. Yeah. I was okay.
Now, having said all of that, would you believe me if I told you that Maverick wasn't the first label interested in the band? Ross Robinson produced demos for Root and Nosebleed because, of course he did. Where can you turn in this genre and not see his hand at work? Anyways, Ross had his link to Roadrunner Records, and the A&R guy, Monte Connor, revealed to MetalSucks.net that he had a chance to sign Deftones on one condition. They had to change the name of the band. Def was no longer cool, Connor recalled, and Tones lumped the band in with the ska movement. The name simply had to go. Surprisingly, I got no real pushback from the band. I don't know if it was because they agreed with me or they were simply hungry for a deal and would do whatever it takes to get signed. Not only was I the first A&R guy to offer them a deal, but I was the only A&R guy to offer them a deal, which we now know is not true. When you are the only label chasing a band and there is no competition, it gives you a lot of leverage. Regardless of what the reason was, they went along with my demand. During the contract negotiations, they would regularly run new names past me, even suggesting at one point that maybe they should call themselves Engine Number 9, named after the best track on the demo. Nevertheless, it wasn't meant to be, and it cost Robinson the opportunity to produce the debut Deftones album, as Maverick wanted someone with more experience. Deftones would also be hitting the road pretty aggressively after signing to Maverick. They played approximately 16 shows in 1994 to 64 in 1995, and it would have been even more if they weren't recording Adrenaline sometime during the first half of the year. Adrenaline was recorded at Bad Animals Studios in Seattle, and they hired Terry Date to make it sound great. Chino was especially appreciative of Terry's grace when he was low in confidence. He was really supportive. I was tripping, pretty scared to do this record. We'd never recorded anything besides those little 2-song demo tapes. And especially with the major label, big studio, big producer, I was a little scared. He was really cool. Sometimes I'd be in the studio and get frustrated. I think it was on Bored, that part where it comes in with Get Bored. That part I could not do. I couldn't come in at the right time. I was just so out of it. I was trying to fix that part because it just didn't sound right. I was tripping and just about crying. I was like, I can't do this, Terry. I can't do it. He was like, it's cool. You can do it. If you want, go home and chill and we'll do it tomorrow. He didn't let me get too frustrated after that. I wanted to quit a couple of times just because I was so freaking nervous. I felt like I was failing sometimes. That's the main thing that I like about Terry. I trusted him. If I liked it and it sounded good to me, he would be like, okay, cool. Adrenaline was released on Maverick Records on October 3rd, 1995. Featured as the album art is a nasal aspirator or bulb syringe used to gently suck mucus out of a baby's nose or airwax from an infant's ears. It is not a butt plug. The choice in album art subverts one's expectations but also confirms it. Such a tool is considered gentle and soft, which are features of Deftones' music. But on this album, those aspects often act more as an accent to the sonic boom as the band shreds for roughly 47 minutes. The opening track, Bored, is a good illustration of this. Chino described Bored as, quote, a smooth way of being pissed and aggravated. The opening is rhythmically jarring to the unprepared, but when the vocals set in, one is met with something akin to a coo. The soft inviting tone underscored by a palm-muted pulse. But by the end, one knows the truth. This is going to be an intense listen. Both intensely heavy and somehow intensely calm. The duality of Deftones. Legend has it that it was written in about half an hour, and as was mentioned earlier, was initially titled Oral. Thank God they changed the name. Earlier, Chino shared his respect for Terry Date when he struggled to get the Get Bored screams down at the right time. Well, here's Terry on Chino. I always do vocals on an SM58, which is a calculated decision since most of the bands I work with have careers that are 90% live work with 58s. Chino destroyed that microphone during recording, threw it around, spit in it. We used that same mic for the whole track, and I gave it to him afterwards. I compressed the vocals really hard so that when he is singing, the vocals sound louder and the background noise disappears. Fun fact, a young and relatively unknown Jacoby Shaddix of Papa Roach features in the music video in the second single from the album. But what I never found out for sure was if Chino named his son after Shaddix or if it was just a coincidence. Then again, I wonder if the bulb syringe was really just because Chino had a son. Because Celeste recently gave birth to Christian. Minus Blindfold is just killer. This was the first of 2 tracks Frank Delgado contributed towards the album. I remember reading the lyrics when I was younger and being floored at how many words I misheard, didn't hear at all, or flat out invented. The booklet doesn't have the lyrics to this track, but there's a lot going on within it. Hanging out with friends, picking sides, and potential car accidents. Chino explained to Livewire in 1996 that, quote, I don't write about one particular subject so much as just talking about how I feel at the moment. I think there are 1 or 2 particular songs where I talk about a specific incident, but mostly I'm just talking about how I feel at the moment and the transition that I'm going through that the music is making me feel. Fun fact, listen to when Chino says 55 near the end of the first verse, and then look at the time elapsed on the song on your media player. I can't believe I didn't realize this until just now. I feel so embarrassed. 1 Week is probably the only nu metal / alternative metal song to feature reggae riffs so seamlessly. and it is one of the few times that Steph just followed Chi for a change. Despite studying the bass masters of metal like Burton and Butler, Chi himself had an affinity for dub. Some call it boring. The more sophisticated appreciate the occasional minimalism as it makes the bass more hypnotic. Abe received special commendation by some publications such as AllMusic for his performance. As a drummer, I wanted the songs to come through, he said to Drummer magazine. There's a difference between playing what's right for the song and the song dictating what's right for itself. Nosebleed is a track where the band stretches their collective minimalism during the verses and near the end, while sandwiched between a bold maximalism at either end of the song. Quoting from Livewire once more, alternating smooth vocals and abrasive ones can be a chore for many vocalists, but for the hard-drinking Chino, it flows like liquor down his throat. He explains, "It's not really that difficult for me. I'm a real moody person. I can be in a good mood or act like an asshole, and that is exactly what comes across in the music. Everything pretty much revolves around love and hate, those two moods. A part of me got sick listening to Lifter so much back in the day. Did I just make that up to sound clever? Well, I guess you'll never know, because much like the lyrical content of this song, once again, I'm hearing something here that sounds like relationship/sexual discontent. If every knuckle is wiped inside of her, what is it that our protagonist is failing to get inside of her? Also, why would he want to be just like you in order to be cool? If you never checked out the lyrics, you'd swear he was saying, "We lift our eyes," when in reality, he sang, "We left our eyes." And of course, you could be forgiven for the mistake. After all, the song is called Lifter. A cryptic note is handwritten beside partial lyrics of Lifter in the Adrenaline booklet. "End of hiding. My stomach keeps turning in. Feel lucky I'm here when I had her throat in my mouth. I'm fucking starved of end of smiling. Someone is excited about my fuck-ups. Least of it came. I won't happen. All I want is what I'll never have." Thankfully, no guessing games are needed for the following track, Root. Chino. That's one of the first songs we ever wrote when Chi first joined the band. There are feelings of love, feelings of trust, just wondering what's going on around you. Morrissey really inspired me in one song when he said, "God come down if you're really there, when you're the one that claims to care." It's like, where am I in all of this? It's like giving up my feelings and what I get in return, that kind of thing. It's a pretty metal song, but I try to throw some sweetness in there too. That's basically the concept of our music. It's sweet, ruthless music. 7 Words, the 7th track on the album, and the first single from the band, also has quite the history. Chino. I wrote it back when I was 16 years old. It's probably one of the angriest songs I've ever written. It was about being oppressed by people around me, the authorities. I felt like the whole world was against me. It was like I was lashing out at those people. If bored was a smooth way of being pissed and aggravated, 7 Words was, quote, a straightforward way of being aggravated. They are essentially about 2 different ways of dealing with the frustration. And perhaps this is why these were the 2 singles to emerge from Adrenaline. Hell, it might even be why the album was called Adrenaline. There were a couple versions of the 7 Words single that were released. The red version features the Smiths' "Please Please Please Let Me Get What I Want," a cover of the song, and the blue version features the penultimate version of Teething, with the final version ending up on the Crow, City of Angels soundtrack. When first listening to the album, Birthmark emerged as one of my favorite tracks, so much so that I would try to not listen to it too much. But I feel there's another link to Lifter, aside from its lyrics being next to Lifters in the booklet. The lyrics are directed enough to be about specific things, but vague enough that I don't want to really go there. Cherished by Two could be about new parents to a newborn child. God, I'll Even Lick Her Picture could be about the usual suspect, or perhaps not. I know Chino writes via stream of consciousness, but what's going on in his consciousness must show on wax, no? Anyways, here's track 9, Engine Number 9, a song that blew my ears off the first time I heard it. Still have the gauze and everything. If you listen to Teething from the 7-word single, you can hear this unique rap style from Chino, but it still sounded sloppy and unsyncopated. In Engine Number 9, it was utter perfection. The vocal layering, immaculate. Even when you listen to the demos, they were okay, but after playing it for so many years, they slam so hard that when you listen to the demos, you just see how important practice is. You can do something well, or you could go even beyond that and reach God tier. The name of the track may have been inspired by Black Sheep's hit song, The Choice Is Yours, where Drez raps Engine Number 9 on the New York Transit line. Fire real. Did we ever learn how to pronounce this? For real? Fire real? Yeah, I say for real, but whatever. Okay, I checked. It's Fire real. For real is the penultimate track of the album and is the second time Frank features on the album. In one of his interviews with Deftones, Nuno Rolinho asked Chino the $1 million question regarding this song. Who was the mad dog that he was so curbed to know when everything felt good? Chino responded by saying, "Oh, it was this girl from a long time ago. I don't want to talk about it." Okay. Finally, we end on Fist, the hidden track of Adrenaline that was produced not by Terry Date, but by Ross Robinson. He didn't get to produce the album, but he still made it onto the album. On Change in the House of Pods podcast, Ross gives some added context to how Deftones and Korn met. According to Ross, it was he who gave Deftones Korn's demo and gave Korn Deftones' demo. That's why they got in touch and decided to perform together. They played a venue in Bakersfield, but when some guy in the crowd was giving the band grief, the band gave it right back. Chino, in particular, flew from the stage with a fist out. And that's how the song was called Fist. I'm kidding. That's not what happened. If that's what actually happened, that'd be really cool. But that is not what I've found. Nevertheless, the guy got kicked out of the show. Deftones manager Dave Park gave Ross some demos to hand out to industry people and to set up shows to play in Los Angeles. But that would never happen. Well, at least not yet anyway. Because the same guy who was heckling the band before came back with some of his crew and fucked up Dave and the band. We're talking broken body parts.
Like, we were actually playing a show one time. We were in Bakersfield. This was like one of the first times we were actually out playing shows, and we were in a show at Bakersfield. Some dude came up. We were playing at this little place. There's hardly anybody there. This dude was heckling the whole show, whatever, but it was like, whatever. I didn't really care about the heckling. But then he ran up on Chi, and he pushed him. Like, when he was playing his bass, he like went up, like there's no one up there, and he went up there and pushed him, whatever. And I just snapped, and I went off stage, and I just started like beating the dude up, whatever. They pulled us apart, and the dude got pulled out of the club. And then we kept playing the show, and probably played like 2 more songs, and then the show was over. So we're after the thing, we're loading up our gear, and this dude comes back with 8 of his friends with pipes and knives and shit, and they come around the thing where we're loading up the trailer, and everybody started running. Abe, the drummer, we all started running because these dudes coming. We saw him come around the corner, and I was like, "Oh, these motherfuckers came back!" And I could see one of the dude had a pipe in his hand, whatever, just running towards us. So we turned around and started jetting, and Abe, poor little Abe, didn't see them coming, whatever. So they got him, and they broke his jaw, broke his collarbone, whatever. So we circled around, we ran around the building. By the time we were coming around the building, I saw them jump into a car and drive off, and I just see Chi laying there, or Abe laying there, and Chi's arms. Chi's sitting on the curb. And Abe's laying there unconscious in Chi's arms, and and she, I think, had got socked too, whatever. I think he had like a black eye or something like that, whatever. But like he was holding Abe, and then we took him to the hospital. And at that point, like that was like a life learning experience. I was just like, oh, dude, I can't let my temper, because I got mad, I hit some dude, and now instead of me getting my ass kicked, I had to see my best friend, who had nothing to do with anything, get his ass kicked.
Eventually, they healed up and played the Dragonfly in LA, which proved to me that concert archives and set list, they don't have all the shows that the bands play, especially their early days. What can I say? I was hopeful. Ross said they came to LA about 20 times from Sacramento. What were we talking about? Oh yeah, Fist, right. Yeah, Fist. It's a great track, and very underrated in my opinion. Extremely moody, and a great closer. The band would tour relentlessly in promotion of Adrenaline, but that wasn't the only way the band found new fans. Deep Cut Can't Even Breathe was featured on the Escape from LA soundtrack in July 1996. While the band didn't go to see the movie because they heard it sucked, the song is quite a unique one. This, along with Crenshaw Punch, sound like Deftones from an alternate universe. You can tell they were listening to a lot of Weezer around this time. Chino wrote the lyrics on a napkin, channeling his inner rock godfathers like the Eagles and the Beatles. But about 2 weeks later, the final and, in my opinion, best version of Teething was released on The Crow, City of Angels soundtrack. Many consider the original to be a cult classic, myself included, but the sequel, wasn't very good. However, Deftones featured in the movie as a live act during a Day of the Dead festival, a tradition that the band incorporated into their tour as the Dia de los Deftones festival since 2018. Over the 35 plus years of Deftones, there have been many highs and lows, but fans worldwide appreciate everything the band has given. Finally, Steph gave what I consider to be one of the greatest pieces of advice for an artist I've ever heard on Be Real's The Smokebox in March 2014. You never assume that it's gonna happen, but you live like it happens. I actually tell people all the time, the difference between doing it at the top versus doing it at the bottom is really none. The act of doing this is the success. You don't have to be known for doing it, you don't have to be seen doing it, but if you're doing it, you're doing it. The level we're at, regardless of how we perceive it or others perceive it, is simply the level we're at because for 20 plus years, we've been doing it. A lot of people think it's an act, they put on a show. I think when you put on an act or create a show, when that show is over, then it's over. That's all there ever was a show. And one thing you can say about Deftones, it was never an act. It was never a show. This was their motherfucking lives. And I'm deeply appreciative they chose to share it with us all. Thank you, Deftones. And thank you for watching.